Hello. Today we're going to talk about YouTube. You are currently using a website to stream a video not created by the platform. In and of itself, that is somewhat unusual given that most broadcast platforms produce their own content, be that the BBC, Netflix, NBC, HBO, and so on. In the age of the products as services model, however, this isn't seen as unusual given that Airbnb is the biggest estate agent or realtor in the world but owns no property, Facebook is the biggest internet content provider but creates none of it, Uber is the biggest taxi company in the world but employs no drivers and owns no cars, and Spotify is the biggest music provider without producing any music or managing any musical artists. These companies, like YouTube, or perhaps more accurately Google, are some of the biggest, wealthiest companies in the world, yet all they are is an intermediary. They have inserted themselves in between the product or service and the customer and have, without our questioning it, made more money than anyone else without producing a single thing. The implications of this are being seen and heard around the world right now, and to fully appreciate the scope and impact of this bizarre state of affairs is the stuff books will be written about in 50 years' time. For now, though, I'd like us to look at the platform we are both using right now and explore why YouTube has a lot of problems. To understand what those problems are and how we got here, let's go back and look at where it started, in the dim mists of the past way back in 2005. YouTube was created by ex-PayPal employees as a way of hosting videos that internet users could upload and share. This was pretty novel at the time. The only videos you had access to online back then were from film or TV companies who could afford the server space. It also wasn't as easy for consumers to capture and convert video to digital back then because smartphones, as we know them today, hadn't even been invented yet. The iPhone was still 2 years away at this point. Most internet audiovisual content at that point were flash videos from the likes of Newgrounds or Rather Good. Regardless, YouTube proved instantly popular with people uploading not their own content but other people's, things like old TV ads, music videos, forgotten TV shows, and shareable moments, along with the occasional funny home video. It speaks volumes that founder Jawed Karim says he was inspired to create the platform when he couldn't find a video of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction online. Time for videos was limited then. I don't think you could upload a video longer than 10 minutes, but within a year the site was attracting 100 million views per day, at which point Google bought it for $1.65 billion. Today the overall annual revenue of YouTube is roughly $15 billion. Not a bad investment, eh? Well, actually, the trouble with a site like YouTube, just like Uber and all the other sites listed earlier, is that it only hosts, it doesn't produce. With the availability of high-quality video capture still a few years away, the stuff being uploaded back then was work produced by other people. SNL cottoned onto this first when their Lazy Sunday sketch became a viral sensation on here, and which they insisted was taken down each time. And so it began, the decade-long battle of ownership and copyright that has morphed into the purgatory you are using right now. But that's not actually what we're here to talk about. The more interesting part of that story is what happened to the people who were creating their own content. In the early days, user-made videos tended to be basic animations, digitized VHS home videos, or video blogs or vlogs as they came to be known, shot on generally poor quality cameras, typically a webcam. The latter proved startlingly popular among the youth as they were the ones creating this stuff and made superstars out of certain creators like the Vlogbrothers. What quickly started to happen though was that these popular content creators saw the promise of this and started investing in making better videos. They soon started shooting on DSLRs, got nice lights, used more adventurous editing, and generally started improving the quality of their output. In short, production costs went up, and this is where one of YouTube's biggest problems emerged. You see, YouTube has a privilege problem. Once standards started to go up with the rise of high-quality consumer electronics, those who may have made interesting or different videos who, to begin with, were on a level playing field with early adopters of the platform, were now being left behind if they did not have the raw capital to invest on good gear. Unless you had a substantial audience, even in the pre-adpocalypse days, you were left behind as casual viewers drifted towards the videos with better production values. And you can see where this is going. It soon meant YouTube became very white very quickly. A good example of where YouTube was at in this regard within 6 years of its Google purchase is in the still available series called Becoming YouTube from 2012 by the 9 Brass Monkeys channel. This was meant to be an appraisal of the state of the platform as viewed by the early 20-something stars of the medium in the UK at the time. They are almost entirely all young white men, and typically middle-class young white men. Though a token effort was made with one episode of the series dedicated to girls on YouTube, which featured Carrie Hope Fletcher, younger sister of pop star and millionaire Tom Fletcher. It is a short, intermittent series of staggeringly high production values for the time, and the fact it was independently produced with, as far as I'm aware, no help from YouTube itself, revealing that there was no shortage of cash amongst this small group. This set the template for how the rest of that decade would proceed for the platform in more ways than one. One thing that is worth noting is what happened to most of those YouTubers featured in that series. Few of them still are YouTubers, having moved on to become producers, television personalities proper, BBC Radio 1 presenters, leads in the West End, best-selling novelists, and, notably, several sexual predators. Another trend that would continue. As YouTube grew, so did the industry around it, with companies like Rooster Teeth and Smosh becoming large enough and profitable enough to become their own production companies, and still remain largely white. Around the time of Obama's second term as president, and ironically the advent of Black Lives Matter movement, YouTube and these various companies began to push for a bit more diversity in their on-screen talent. YouTube even began taking a hand in rewarding and backing its content creators at this point with the advent of YouTube Red. This, it was said, was to encourage more people of differing backgrounds to share their stories, but by then, it was too late. Without the initial outlay required for a good camera, good editing equipment and software, as well as the time investment required to develop a channel and branding as well as to promote yourself, you were shouting into the void. People still tried, and some even succeeded, but then came the phenomenon of burnout that was laughed at by the professional classes who never saw social media careers as viable to begin with anyway. YouTubers would invest their lives into their channel, working longer hours for little to no reward, and people were surprised when burnout became a thing. Meanwhile, Logan Paul could take a holiday to Japan to film the body of a dead man who hung himself, none of which had any impact on his earnings whatsoever. What became clear was that YouTube promoted itself as being a creative marketplace of ideas where anyone could succeed, yet this was blatantly untrue, as its own systems favoured generally wealthier white faces both in its content producers and its audience, which leads us to another of the platform's biggest problems. YouTube is only in it for itself. Remember that estimated $15 billion annual revenue YouTube makes? That's revenue, not profit. YouTube, despite being the second most visited website below its parent site Google, has never turned a profit in 16 years. Just like Netflix, that's $20 billion in the hole, YouTube is able to run at a loss thanks to its market standing that says it offers growth, i.e., it keeps money flowing in the right directions. Its core metric for success is in what is called engagement. What this means for YouTube is that once you are on its site, they do not want you to leave. Everything about its landing page and subsequent layouts for the video player is dedicated to keeping you there. It uses the data harvested by its parent company and affiliates to tailor content to show you as soon as you arrive, whether you have a Google account or not. This is part of the much-talked-about algorithm, which is supposedly this sophisticated Uber brain that follows trends and habits, whereas it is actually a dumb-as-rocks if or when program desperately trying to keep you on the site, so its much more sophisticated advertising system can continue to harvest your data and sell you more things. This is why the most successful videos and the ones the algorithm will favour are the ones that don't necessarily have the most views, but ones that get watched all the way through. A video's watch time is the key metric the algorithm uses as it shows a viewer stayed on the site for an extended period and watched or saw a minimum of 3 adverts in that time. The ad revenue created by this is substantial, yet only a pittance is then handed to the video creator as reward, but also as breadcrumbs to incentivize them to keep producing more of that same content. It was notable when videos suddenly became longer because the algorithm saw that people were more likely to watch an hour-long video all the way through, and that made them more money. As a consequence, YouTubers all suddenly started making hour-long videos to cater to the platform's demands, regardless of whether the topic demanded that length. As someone who writes video essays for a reasonably large channel, I saw a lot of essays that wandered around their point for an hour when it could have been made in just 10 minutes. Meanwhile, other videos got buried because they talked about unprofitable things, which brings us to the third big problem. YouTube has a censorship problem. Wisecrack made a video a year or so back on what we called the Hitler industrial complex, which commented on the proliferation of media that is obsessed with Hitler and the Nazis, and why that's not really a good thing. Despite having nearly 3 million subscribers, the video tanked as it got flagged by YouTube, who didn't show it in subscribers' feeds and prevented it from getting recommended. Ostensibly, this was because the automated assessment program probably deemed the video to be in breach of its guidelines on hate speech by promoting the Nazis. This ignored the context that this was a video produced by 3 Jewish people that was heavily criticizing other companies' exploitation of such a hateful ideology, without necessarily condoning it, in the name of profit. All the while, ultra-right-wing content that defended actual Nazis marching in Charlottesville was allowed to continue uploading. On the flip side of this, my video from my tiny channel on Bloodborne and feminism does not, at time of writing, show up in any searches unless you type in the exact name of the video or my name explicitly. I only discovered this recently when a video on Bloodborne made by an equally small channel was recommended to me, and I wondered why I had not picked up more views on my own, as there is a cottage industry of videos made about that 5-year-old video game that amounts to some pretty significant viewing figures. Turns out, mine was not deemed worthy of recommendation by the algorithm. I did a bit of investigating to see why, even with the right search terms and tags, this might happen, and I found YouTube's list of priorities for content it has programmed into its systems. These priorities being relevance, engagement, and quality, with their definition of quality being a demonstration of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Setting aside the fact that these criteria are not viable for a significant number of channels, nor is this actually universally what viewers require from their videos they watch, it also sums up all my points in one fell swoop. The videos are only relevant based on data harvested without informed consent. They must retain engagement to ensure YouTube's ad revenue continues so the mythical growth that keeps the administrators from coming in is maintained, and the quality standards the platform demands require a financial outlay not attainable by the majority of producers on this platform. I do not believe there is a shadowy secret cabal at the top of YouTube who wish to silence voices from the BAME community, nor quell difficult topics such as racism, classism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and so on. From what I hear, the teams at YouTube are generally quite a nice bunch, who are just as frustrated with the systems in place as the users and producers are. They do not actively censor content. But, unfortunately, because of the profit motivations of the company centered around engagement and the way the most active viewers skew white, straight, and male, those systems cater to that demographic, and equally, it must defend the wealth of the corporations it must work with, hence all those copyright issues. This, then, creates a website that, albeit unintentionally, censors certain voices and certain topics by consciously or unconsciously not allowing their videos to be seen in the same way others are, all of which creates an ugly, unhealthy economy that is fast becoming damaging and even dangerous. These are just some of YouTube's major problems, and they are not alone in this. Most of the major tech companies, social media sites and platform apps are guilty of these issues too, but in the spirit of biting the hand that feeds you, or doesn't feed you as the case may be, this video was made to clarify the obnoxious aspects of this current model of capitalism inherent to this website that is so nakedly exploitative and gate-kept. The clue is in the name. It's YouTube, not iTube, or even WeTube. Just like with the Uber drivers, the vagaries of national economies and the needs of the people who keep the growth and engagement churning are not defined as employees. And as a corporation, Google and YouTube remained largely disinterested in you, the viewer, and me, the producer. Even if YouTubers or content producers were to unionize, it would not result in any sort of satisfactory result, given the way court rulings have gone for Uber drivers and the like in recent years. And besides, creator turnover on this site is high. Most of the high-profile YouTubers move on to bigger media projects like TV, film, or becoming boxers, with a vast school of video makers just beneath the surface vying with the engagement criteria of the algorithm waiting in the wings to take their place. More than this, it is worth remembering YouTube is not forever. Nothing is. Like every other platform that produces nothing itself, one day it will go away, and all of the content independent creators have made will go with it, destroying the livelihoods of thousands and vanishing some worthy art produced along the way. YouTube has a lot of problems, but its biggest is its selfishness. It is not up to us to keep this website in a manner it has become accustomed to, and we should stop treating it as the generous benefactor it never was and never will be. Today we learned why YouTube was made, YouTube's primary business motivations, and why this is one of the most openly exploitative forms of managerial technocracy that lays bare the self-serving nature of capitalism and corporate greed. Be sure to note this down in your textbooks, as this will come up in future videos. Thanks for watching.